Should you own a rental house? Hi, Steve Schultz here from Blue Fox Properties. Let's jump right into it. I love rental houses, but I don't believe they are for everyone. So let's take a closer look at some of the questions you should ask yourself to figure out if you should own a rental house. So for starters, why do you want to rent the house? So there are three different categories I would lump this into. The first one is, do you plan to move into it later? Now, this is a common scenario here in Tucson in particular because we have a lot of people that plan to retire here in Tucson. So the idea is they're going to buy a house now because either the perfect house is available or they think it's going to be cheaper today than it will, say, 3 years from now when they plan to move in. So they're going to buy the house today, plan to move in, let's say 3 years down the road, and that's part of their retirement plan. A couple things I'll share with you related to that. One is, from my experience, most people don't move into it later. What happens is a lot of times is the grandkids are the driver to where the grandparents want to live. And so sometimes in that, 3-year time frame plus or minus, the grandkids move out of Tucson and now the grandparents want to move to wherever the grandkids are. So that's the thing, is just be aware of that and just make sure that's something you actually are going to do, is move into it later. The other thing that sometimes happens too is when you make the house a rental, you do lose some control of the house. So the example I give you here is, let's say you're allergic to cats and dogs, for example. Well, once you make the house a rental, by law, if somebody has a legitimate emotional support animal that's either a dog or a cat, you have to allow it in the house. So now, although you can say no pets if you like, that's not a pet. You have to allow it. So now there could be a cat or dog in the house, and if you have concerns because of allergies and things along those lines, that could be an issue for you later. So just keep that in mind. Again, I'm not saying don't do it or you shouldn't do it. Just know that that is something you may have to deal with. All right, another reason is maybe you can't sell the house. So this again is a very common one, especially in down markets here in Tucson, is you can't sell the house. So really what it boils down to is your option is, your plan B, if you will, is I either rent the house because I don't have the $30,000 to come in and close because my house has no equity in it, right? So maybe it's going to be $30,000 of a cost to actually close the transaction if you were to sell it. So that's a common one too. So sometimes renting is really just boils down to plan B. And another scenario is you're actually wanting to use the house as an investment. And so if that's the case, that's great. What I'd encourage you to consider though are, what are your financial expectations and are they realistic? And one of the things I would think about here is as it relates to appreciation. So sometimes in the market, which has certainly happened in the past, there are years of appreciation that it's been 15, 20, 25% appreciation for one single year, which is great if you're on the right side of that equation. But in general, historically, over time across the United States, about 3% is what you could expect, again, on average, historically, for a house to appreciate over time. So as it relates to your financial expectations, that's what I would plug in. Now, if it just so happens when you do go to sell the property, we have one of those ramp ups where it just, it went up 15% the last couple of years or whatever, that's great, you're ahead of the game, but just make sure you look at realistic expectations. Another thing I would consider is, how does the rental fit into your overall investment strategy? So for example, if you think of stocks and bonds, and there are a bunch of different vehicles you could use, right? I look at rental houses as the bonds part, right? It's going to be a lower yield typically, but more secure. I mean, the house isn't going to disappear overnight. Again, those things can happen too, obviously, but in a perfect world, that's not going to happen. Unlike it's very possible in, let's say, an S&P 500 investment, all of a sudden the market tanks, boom, which is something that happened back in the 2008 timeframe. And now all of a sudden your investment is worth way less than, what it was just a day ago or whatever may be the case. So let me give you an example of why I love rental houses using exactly that scenario. So in the 2008 timeframe, when the market crashed, there was the joke that everybody's 401k became their 201k because the values dropped about 50%. And what happened here in Tucson is the house values dropped about 50% too. It's one of the states that got hit the hardest as it relates to that. So it was about 50% here in Tucson as well. But what didn't happen is the rents didn't go in half. So although the rents did drop a little bit, yes, nowhere near that much, and the vacancy periods were longer, yes, the rents did drop, yes, but it was still a very, very stable investment as long as you didn't have to sell the house. And then over time, of course, the values recovered and everything was right with the world again, right? So yeah, so that's something to keep in mind as well, and it wasn't nearly as damaging as the stock market. The next thing you want to take a look at is, what is your risk tolerance? Rentals are not for the faint of heart. It's something you're dealing with people that are unpredictable. So it can be something that it's not like I said, just not for the faint of heart, and you gotta have some risk tolerance. By the way, don't forget to subscribe for more landlord tips like this, and feel free to contact us here at Blue Fox Properties if you need help with your Tucson rental house. So let's continue. The next thing is, can you accept the fact that tenants are unpredictable? You know, you cannot control whether or not they pay the rent, or whether or not they comply with the lease, or whether or not they comply with the HOA rules and regulations. Now, we do everything we can to try and screen people out on the front end, but at the end of the day, we can't control the tenants, and they are unpredictable. Next, do you have access to financial resources for reserves? You know, things can go wrong. It could be a major maintenance repair, maybe an air conditioning repair, maybe the tenant doesn't pay rent, maybe there's tenant damage at the end of the lease. You got to make sure you have some financial resources in reserve for these different scenarios. Now, reserves could take the form of cash, ideally. You know, we recommend 6 months of expenses as reserves, and if you have that in cash, that's perfect, but it doesn't necessarily have to be cash. You know, it could be access to credit card, a home equity line of credit, a 401k loan, maybe a loan from a family or a friend, and maybe it's a personal bank loan, whatever it might be. You just want to make sure you have access to money should you need it. The next thing is, can you emotionally separate yourself from the house? And this is really critical. If you can't do that, if it was a house you lived in, and now you plan to make a rental, that's where a lot of bad decisions get made, is if you have that emotional connection. So you have to disconnect. If it was a house you lived in and you're making it a rental, it's a business now. It's not the house you raised your children in. It's a business now. You got to be able to make that separation. And then the next thing is, what other investment vehicles might be a better fit for you? You know, so again, I mentioned stocks, bonds, or a million other things out there as well. You know, maybe that's a better fit for you because it isn't something that's so personal and so emotionally charged and things along those lines. So maybe the rental house isn't the right answer for you. So all that being said, again, I'm a big believer in rental houses. I'm not trying to talk you out of rental houses, obviously. Like I said, not only am I an owner of rental houses, but also obviously our firm, that's what we do all day, every day. So not trying to talk you out of a rental house. I just want to make sure you're ready for what you're getting yourself into. I hope this helps you decide if a rental house is right for you. Don't forget to subscribe below, and I'll see you on the next video.